Hello. Thank you so much for coming, and also thanks to the library for hosting me. Uh, I don't have anything against cliches, I find, because cliches are true. There's some part of it that's true. And so it is truly an honor to be here because libraries have been such an important part of my life. We went to the library on Long Island when I was growing up all the time. That was just a regular event. My father went once a week to our library, and he'd come back with a pile of books, and he would just take out anything that was interesting to him. And I have had the honor of visiting a lot of wonderful libraries. I had a short-term fellowship at the New York Public Library, and it was absolutely amazing. But every library is special. My library in West Hartford is a wonderful place, and I spent a lot of time there. So thank you so much for having me here. So I translated a book, as you know. This is it. This is the book. And the author's name is Edith Bruck. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Edith Bruck. I'm going to share some of her work, including a story from the translation. But I'm going to start with a poem that she wrote. So she's still alive. I saw her this past summer. She is 94, and she has written almost 24 works of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. She's also been a playwright. She wrote for Italian television quite a bit, and so she's very prolific and continues to speak to especially school children in Italy about her experiences. And I'm going to talk specifically about her life as a survivor and when she was deported. But as I said, I'm going to start with this poem, which is called Maybe by Edith Bruck. And here's how the poem goes. Of the men who count in life, there's only one, the father who is missing. It's called Forse in Italian, and that's the whole poem, 4 lines. Easy work for me to translate, you could say, but what weight and depth it wields. It's so short, I'd like to share the original. Gli uomini che contano nella vita sono uno, il padre mancato. In another poem, Ms. Bruck muses about how her mother's apron smelled during her childhood. She writes, like warm bread, like fresh wheat, like happiness, like fear, like death, like everything, like nothing. Mama, what a strange word. I've never written it as an adult. I've never spoken it, except as a child, except at school, where a popular topic was mama, home, family. Strange words. Words. Edith Bruck was deported by the Nazis from her native Hungarian village a few weeks shy of her 13th birthday, and soon found herself in Auschwitz, the most notorious Nazi concentration camp that ever was, a place she would later call the University of Evil in a speech about her unorthodox education that she gave at a university in Rome. She managed to survive her imprisonment, but her parents did not. Edith Bruck's beloved father died at Dachau, a concentration camp in southern Germany where he was deported in 1944. So yes, one can imagine that of the men in life who count, for her, there's only one, to quote the poem. The story of her mother's fate is quintessential and astonishing, but almost too painful, too human to behold. When they arrived at the gates of Auschwitz after being deported, Edith's mother initially clung to her. She had lost so much already. She was desperate after the long, grueling train trip. She had just watched her husband being led away toward the camp for men. But a soldier intervened and tried to separate Edith from her mother. There was a struggle. The soldier struck Bruck's mother, and ultimately her mother pushed her away and saved her life. Bruck's mother went in the direction of the gas chambers and likely died almost immediately, while Bruck herself joined the line for forced labor. She's lived almost her entire life with the imprint of her mother's loving shove, a shove toward life and away from the gas chambers. So as I mentioned, I'm speaking to you today because earlier this year I published the first English translation of Edith Bruck's 1962 short story collection, which in Italian is called Andremo in città. My translation, which I want to say was funded in part with a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. The National Endowment for the Arts is an amazing organization, and it provides funding for book projects that maybe otherwise would never actually get published. So the title of my book is actually "This Darkness Will Never End," which is a line from one of the short stories. And this book consists of stories that Edith Bruck wrote about a decade and a half after being liberated from a Nazi concentration camp. The collection bridges two spheres of Edith Bruck's life, before and after. Nearly all of the stories, as I describe in the preface, the Holocaust hovers over the reader. Either it's looming ahead as a fate that can't be avoided, or it's lurking in the background as the past that can never be escaped. It was her first short story collection, and it includes a tale about a young woman on holiday in Greece who has survived the Holocaust. She is in the city of Athens as the Jewish Passover feast is being celebrated, and she's invited to the home of a wealthy businessman. She is thinking about her parents, now dead. She is thinking about Passover feasts from childhood. She's wondering about her place in the world. And as she's leaving the dinner, the narrator sees a young girl, and she describes the girl this way. She was the age I had been when I lost everyone and everything. It's a line that I think a lot about. You translate an entire book, but sometimes you remember specific lines. The age I had been when I lost everyone and everything. The collection is a work of fiction. The scenarios are invented. For example, one of the stories that I think is so pivotal is a story called Sylvia. And Edith Bruck invented a narrator who is a young German boy whose father is an important Nazi commander. She somehow had the presence of mind to imagine what this boy might be like, and that actually this boy could rescue a young girl who is hiding in the woods. But so, they're invented stories. They're not necessarily something that she experienced directly, but obviously we can imagine that when she writes a line like, the age I was when I lost everyone and everything, that is essentially Edith Bruck speaking directly to us. And as I mentioned, she is 94 years old, and in Italy, she is a living legend. She's spoken of in the same breath as Primo Levi. She is such an important witness to the Holocaust that Pope Francis insisted on meeting her. And when she learned that he wanted to meet her, she asked, when did she need to be at the Vatican? She could be there anytime. And the Vatican said, no, you don't understand. He's going to come to your apartment. And what's fascinating is that, so she is at the time of their meeting, a 90-something Jewish woman, but she was, nervous as a schoolgirl because the Pope was coming to her apartment, and they struck up an amazing friendship, and she actually wrote a book about it, and the book is called, it hasn't been translated into English, but it's called Sono Francesco, which means it's Francis, because he would leave voicemails for her, and what else was he going to say, but it's Francis. And when I saw her over this past summer, I have to say, she has some reservations about the new pope, but I think it's just she simply misses her friend, But so, I always find it's a fascinating situation because she is someone who is so well known in Italy, but virtually unknown here. And one of the reasons that I wanted to translate this book so much is because the title story, which in my version is "This Darkness Will Never End," is considered by important film scholars, including Millicent Marcus at Yale, to be the inspiration for Roberto Benigni's Life is Beautiful. His film, Benigni is a comedian, so of course his film is not nearly as somber as the story that I translated. But in other words, one of my motivations was millions of Americans have seen this movie. Let's also see what the original source material was like, which is the title story. I would like to read two pieces. One, as I said, will be one of the stories from the collection. But first, I would like to read a translation that I published earlier this year of a speech that Edith Bruck gave. She was given an honorary doctorate, and I think when she thought about what she would say to the graduates of this university in Rome, she asked herself, well, what was my education like? And so the speech she wrote is called My Alma Mater is Auschwitz. My translation was published by World Literature Today on January 27th, which is the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And so I'm thankful for World Literature Today. Okay. As the poorest among the poor, with or without anti-Semitism and the race laws, I wouldn't have been able to attend university. My alma mater is Auschwitz, a place that's become the symbol of absolute evil among the 1,635 concentration camps that belonged to the ultra-civilized Germany and other countries allied with or occupied by Hitler. Auschwitz, the university where you learn everything, above all to know yourself. There you learn anthropology, philosophy, history, psychology, faith and religion, the value of life, the value of bread. But it also teaches the sorrow you feel when a blonde child spits on you. There's much to learn for the man who in slavery is defenseless and incapable of looking after himself. There's much to learn for the woman who's stronger and more resistant to the pain, shrewder and more capable of coming up with tricks to evade selection for the crematorium. The woman who learns to make herself invisible in order to gain another day of life. You also learn the lingo of swear words, the range of behavior among different social classes, shame and pity for the guards, though the cold, the hunger, and the terror cloud your reason and don't permit much feeling. You learn to understand everything. You understand the dehumanizing of the deported who become capos. You understand and pity the companions willing to take on a miserable job in exchange for the chance to steal a piece of turnip from the bottom of the soup pot. But you also discover light in the darkness. When, for example, a soldier gives you a warm potato, a tattered glove, when he leaves a bit of jelly in the mess tin he's tossed you to wash, and when he asks you, "What's your name?" It sounds like the voice of heaven. You're no longer prisoner 11152. You exist. And so you begin to hope you'll come out of that hell and come out a better person, because you won't ever forget three things: that you'll never be a racist, a fascist, you'll never discriminate against anyone, and you'll never be like your persecutors. I, who graduated with honors from the University of Evil, I learned about goodness. From the cesspit, I extracted gold. That's why I'm especially struck when I read about a woman in Padua who, upon leaving church, told a journalist, "Let all the migrants drown." Or about the man from Lodi who calls children without access to school lunches fleas on dogs. I'm frightened by the blind terrorism, the fanaticism, the dark wind that blows once again through Europe, and not only Europe. I ask myself, why is it that man never learns anything from his own crimes and keeps committing them? Why he allows himself to be seduced by nationalism and racism and hatred and egotism. He builds walls, barbed wire fences. He has no sympathy for those who are fleeing war, famine, violence, and torture. Rather than face the past, man denies his own complicity, his own responsibility for what happened yesterday, what's happening today, and what could happen again tomorrow. What was the purpose, then, of the gulags and death camps? You cannot heal from Auschwitz by writing or talking about it, but it is an experience that must be told, especially to young people, for their present and their future, because all of it concerns everyone. Communication isn't pressing a key, but recognizing, respecting every human being, regardless of religion or color, if we still want to call ourselves human beings. History is woven with lies and distortion, with wars and profits. It's dominated by the ambition for power and the exploitation of the weakest. The role of witness is tiring and uncomfortable. Recounting, writing, and reliving the past is a weighty task, but it's always worth it because someone is listening. The Italian language, which I adopted when I arrived in Italy in 1954, has been my freedom and salvation. It's the armor that protects me from the pain my native tongue still stirs up for me. If I write bread in Hungarian, I immediately see my mother by the oven with her apron forever covered in flour. I see her face flushed from effort and joy over the 5 loaves freshly baked for her many children. Italian bread, on the other hand, is simply what comes from the bakery. The Italian language is my home, it's my country, and this language of mine, adopted as an adult and beloved as though it were a child, I've helped it grow, and it's allowed me to grow and recount the unspeakable. In moments of dismay, I ask myself if there's any use to writing, shouting, bearing witness, warning people's consciences. Then I tell myself, work, walk, believe, love as long as there's a single reader, a single other being who understands each person's right to dignity. There aren't lesser men. There are only lesser ideologies that lead to barbarity. So that was a speech that she gave in Rome in 2021, I believe. Actually, I'm sorry, 2018. I apologize, 2018, so before the pandemic. And it reminds me that she has an interesting history, although it's her life, so she may not necessarily see it that way. But born in Hungary and deported shortly before her 13th birthday, once she's liberated from the camps, I've learned in doing research about her and research about other survivors, she wandered, and apparently that was fairly common, that it took a long time to get back to your hometown, and that in her case, there was nothing to go back to. Her parents were dead. One of her brothers also died in the camps. And she did actually return to her Hungarian village once, and it's the subject of a novella that she wrote that I've also translated. That is, it's a surreal work, and yet she wasn't intending it to be surreal. It is fictional, but it happens to also describe her own return, which was that people felt guilty, people were astonished, and many, the narrator in this novella, many approach her seeking absolution, in the hopes that if they just touch her, if they just serve her a meal, if they just see her again, that everything that they didn't do during the war will be forgiven. But in any event, she wandered. She spent a short while in Israel, and then ultimately she finds herself in Italy in the early 1950s and decides to settle there. She falls in love with the language, falls in love with the people. Again, it's a cliche, but it's a true cliche and a very interesting one. And the short story collection that I translated, it was her second book. Her first book which has been translated and is called Who Loves You Like This. She began writing it as she was, sort of wandering after liberation, and she wrote it in Hungarian, and in the course of her travels lost the manuscript. When she arrived in Italy, she thought Italian sounded so sunny to her. It sounded so full of hope and possibility that she decided to rewrite the book in Italian. And from that point on, she has only written in Italian. And in fact, I was asking her when I saw her in Rome over the summer, I was just trying to get at this idea that she doesn't write in Hungarian. She says no, and she has a perfectly good reason for that. She's written about many things, but obviously a lot of her work is about survival, and writing about it in Italian, she has said, creates a linguistic buffer, so that to think about it in Italian, to write about it in Italian, as painful as these experiences are, there is a disconnect. There is a sort of a grace that enables her to write about these experiences. But in any event, yes, so she's been living in Rome since 1954, and she published her first book in 1959, and at the time, the Diary of Anne Frank had been published not too long before this period, and so that initially Italian critics said she was the kind of writer that Anne Frank would have become had she survived. And this was something that I discovered when I was writing the preface for my translation, and it's, I don't know, it's sort of mind-boggling, because Anne Frank is someone, I think many of us feel she sort of belongs to us. Her story is so beautiful and so tragic that we feel as though we know her. And so it's an interesting idea to think that Edith Bruck, captures some of what maybe Anne would have told us had she survived. But it also tells us something else. One of the other reasons that I'm so interested in Edith Bruck's work is that she is a woman, and many of the things that she's going to write about the Holocaust would be true no matter whether she was a man or a woman. But the fact is, women had a different experience of deportation and of internment in the concentration camps. And so she's bringing us the voices of women and also the voices of children. And in many cases, children were deported with their mothers, and mothers played a pivotal role in whether these children survived or not. And as we know from Edith's experience of arriving at Auschwitz with her mother, and ultimately, not wanting to be separated from her mother, but essentially that separation saves her life. And we were talking about this over the summer, and it's such an interesting thing, because I gave a lot of readings in the spring when the book first came out, and people were so wonderful. They had questions, and it was such a funny situation, because I could then refer these questions to her. And one of the things that I elicited from her is that she still thinks about her parents just about every day. And her idea is that as long as she's alive and she's written these books and the books remain in print, it's as though her parents are alive. And again, any of us could have had that thought, but we didn't have her experience. She's written these incredible works. She's meditated over these very difficult ideas, but the cost has been quite severe. I'm going to read one of the stories from the translation, but one other thing that I wanted to mention, as I said, she's quite prolific, and one of her other books that has not been translated into English is called Signora Auschwitz. And if you translated it, it would translate as Mrs. Auschwitz. And she wrote the book about her experiences speaking to Italian school children. And she found that they had such little knowledge of the Holocaust and of concentration camps that they would confuse her name with Auschwitz. And so that students would just sometimes say, I'm sorry, excuse me, Mrs. Auschwitz. You know, of course it would be Signora Auschwitz. And it's so stunning to me. It's something that's almost, it's surreal that it's so crazy, but that's her life. That is something that she's lived through. And a lot of interesting anecdotes like this emerge in the book Signora Auschwitz. But one of the things that she says that gives us an approximation of what it's like to be a woman surviving the Holocaust is that she says the memory of what she experienced is like being impregnated with a monster, you know, impregnated in Auschwitz with a monster that she'll never deliver this fetus, and she can never abort this fetus. It is just something that she has to live with forever. All right, I'm going to read one of the stories from the collection, This Darkness Will Never End. And this is one of the shorter stories. Some of the stories are long and don't necessarily lend themselves the best to a reading. This one is called Come to the Window, It's Christmas. My mother made one final effort and then sank into the big bed. A lovely cloud of white feathers wafted almost up to the ceiling and slowly fell like the snow I could see through the window. My father turned toward the wall and sneezed twice, causing the flame in the oil lamp to flicker. Then, grumbling loudly, he stuck his head under the covers. It was one of those high country beds, all wooden down, with pillowcases so worn that feathers flew everywhere at any brisk movement. As kids, we could only climb onto the bed with the help of a stool or with a leap, which always upset our mother. It was her bed, where she'd been sleeping for 20 years, and every feather that emerged was a feather ripped from her heart. That heart was vast, generous, even kinder than the heart of God. No one has ever loved, prayed, mourned, and cried all at once with the same passion as her. She fretted over the old stove, over the broken-down chairs and the wobbly table, the cracked kitchen walls, the few pieces of furniture I bumped into with the broom, even the gas ring on the stove if she caught me darkening my face with lamp black to scare my younger siblings. In our house, everything belonged to Mama, and everything was forbidden. Raise the lamp a little, our mother said. It's too dark. At that moment, the flame went out, and there was a dim light from outside. Get me the matches, Mama continued. They're in your father's pocket. Where? On the chair, can't you see? I could see just fine, but I wanted to keep my parents up as I waited for my friends to come sing under our window, just like every year for their Christmas Eve night celebration. It's completely white outside, I said, longing to go out. How else would December be? My father mumbled from under the covers. It's only 8 o'clock, Mama. It's all beautiful and white. Everyone else is going out. We're the only ones staying home. Have you gone crazy? Mama said. It's Christmas, Mama. I have to go out. Do you want to wake up your father? Turn down the lamp. Cover me gently, like that. Now good night, and be quiet. Biting my tongue, I obeyed her, but I wasn't ready to join my little brother Adi at the foot of the bed. I wandered about the house like a cat, and my mother's voice surprised me in the kitchen. What are you looking for? The water is in the enamel bucket under the table. I'm trying to sleep, my father said. Lucky for you that you never have any worries, my mother sighed. I can't even manage to sleep in the feather bed. Why? Are you afraid you'll ruin it? Papa replied. Then after hesitating briefly, he added, There isn't anything to eat, is there? I heard my mother turn over in bed. Is something wrong, Imre? Before you could sleep even without any dinner. Papa, can you imagine how much they'll eat tonight? I said happily, joining in on the conversation. It's a lucky event for the poor and a nice tradition, giving carolers sweets, ham, sausage, even money. Alarmed, my mother said, "You're not going to let her go out, are you?" "Oh, I'm not even thinking about that," I said. "I'm saying Christmas is a boon for Christians. If my friends come, you'll give them some change, won't you, Papa?" Enough of this talk. My father turned to face the wall to sleep so he could forget his hunger. "You can't send them away. I beg you, Mama. You tell them, too. Don't waste any more breath. Luckily, your father's already sleeping." On tiptoe, I approached the bed. I could hear my father snoring. "Mama," I whispered, "move his head away from the wall. It's so damp, and it smells of mold." Mama took my father's head in her hands and turned it toward us, laughing in the semi-darkness. "If you could feel how much it weighs, who knows what all is inside? It weighs more than the rest of him." I was laughing, too, as I thought of Papa's slender neck and the way he rested his head on his chest like an underfed goose. All in all, my mother was happy to chat because she had insomnia, and I couldn't ask for anything more that night. I was excited, awaiting the carols that would be heard from outside and couldn't come soon enough. "I wonder why my brothers never write to me," Mama said. "It's because of the war," I replied, rushing to say something else so she wouldn't have time to ponder or get worked up to the point of tears, thinking them all dead already. "Have an apple, Mama," I said to her. "I put one under your pillow. There should be a mandarin, too." I helped Mama rummage around. We found the apple first, then the mandarin, which had wound up at the bottom of the bed. It was warm, and the peel smelled like the hair of Roma women. Mama ate the whole thing, and I had the apple. "Your father is the kindest man in the world. He has many faults, but I see him the way he was 20 years ago when he arrived on a sturdy horse and jumped down, knocking the heels of his soft boots so he could ask for my hand in marriage. It was the second time that he was visiting me, and my parents, of course, weren't amenable." Stopping to listen, Mama didn't finish her thought and extended her bare arm to turn off the lamp. Then she instinctively ducked her head under the covers as if afraid. "Do you hear footsteps?" she asked anxiously. "You bet I do," I replied cheerfully in the dark. "They're strange sounds," Mama whispered. "You better wake your father." "Don't be afraid, Mama. It's Christmas Eve. You think war observes holidays?" "They're coming," I said excitedly, and I jumped to my feet on the bed to get closer to the window. "Don't move," Mama ordered me. I gazed out the window, holding my breath. Mama had succeeded in spreading her fear. The voices drifting up were muddled. They didn't sound like kids, but men speaking an unfamiliar language, until a clearer voice shouted, "Everyone out!" Mama shot up out of bed and ran toward the corner of the room to pack some items piled on the floor into an old suitcase. That suitcase must have been there for a while, but I hadn't noticed it. My father also leapt up and feverishly began searching for clothes, his eyes still shut. Stunned, I asked, "What are you doing?" And I threw open the window. My friends were below, huddled together in the snow, and they were roaring with laughter. They all had mustaches drawn on in lampblack, and they greeted me with a thunderous, "Heil Hitler!" "It's them!" I shouted with joy. My father peered at the entrance to the kitchen, his black eyes shining like lit coal. He was crying, perhaps for the first time in his life. My friends noticed it too. "We were joking," one of them said. "We didn't mean to scare you." "Get out of here," Papa bellowed. "Get out of here, you idiots." His voice terrified my friends, who fled, forgetting their sausage, ham, and sweets under our window. My father went out in his stocking feet and was surrounded immediately by a pack of ravenous dogs that squared off as they circled the food. Mama grabbed the broom and ran to help him. With a hop from the window, I too was in the street to give a hand to my father, ripping the sausage away from the dogs and gathering the food in the snow. "That disgusting stuff won't enter this house," my mother yelled. "Don't shout," my father panted as he kept fighting off the dogs. "Imre, throw that garbage out," my mother said firmly. "We could sell it," stammered my father, who had managed to save a large, clean bit of ham. "You'll see, Mama. We'll become rich." "Take it away so I don't see it," Mama shouted behind me as I escaped into the kitchen with the spoils. As soon as we were all back inside and she'd bolted the door, Mama said, "God has punished them." "It was a joke, right, Papa? Just a joke." "Of course, my little one. It was only a joke. Now we can sleep. We'll sell it all tomorrow with the hunger that's going around." And he smiled at my mother as if seeking forgiveness for his weakness. I'm struck always by several things when I read that story. First and foremost, that what a unique perspective. She grew up in a rural village in Hungary near the border with Ukraine, and Jews were in the minority. And, they lived side by side their Christian neighbors, and they had good relations with some neighbors, not so good relations with other neighbors. And as I said, she tells the story of returning to her village, and many people did nothing to help, watched while they were deported. But what an incredible situation to have incorporated these Christian traditions into her own celebrations. And again, it's a fictional story, but we can imagine that she draws on her life. But also the other element, I think possibly because I'm a mother now, is I see the world from the parents' perspective. And so she has not noticed that they've kept this suitcase in a corner ready to go at any time because they don't know when they're going to be deported. And the other thing that I'm moved to mention is that this collection is many things. So for sure it is a collection of stories that captures what it was like to be a Hungarian Jew before, during, and after World War II. But it's also a snapshot of a way of life that was lost, traditions that rural Jews had in Hungary at this time. There's another story about the individual in their Jewish community who is tasked with ritually slaughtering animals so they can be consumed, kosher families can consume them. And it's also, again, a snapshot of a way of life that in many ways was very colorful and obviously was in an extremely loving, wonderful childhood that then just simply, vanished. And so in some ways, translating the collection was such an incredible project because there are these moments of unspeakable horror, unspeakable sadness and tragedy, but also joy and rituals that sustained them, and also just simply that think of all that someone her age, and her specifically, has witnessed in the course of her life. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed that story, and I am happy to answer any questions and happy to read another story. But anyway, thank you so much for coming, and thank you very much to the library for having me. Okay. She did not, no. Unfortunately, she was unable to have children, and it's something that she has written about in poetry, that she had several miscarriages and was unable to have children. But she often would say that she she continues to say it, she thinks of her books as children, as her children. That was what she invested her life's work in. And she also spent incredible amounts of time speaking to Italian school children. And she continues to, at 94, she's not very mobile. But in this era of Zoom, she can speak to anybody. And she spends a lot of her time appearing, via Zoom to various groups. And so it's one of the reasons why she got to meet Pope Francis, because he wanted to honor her sacrifices. And so yeah, no, she didn't have a family of her own. No. Yes, so it has not been published in English, but it. So well, because the NEA grant was for I applied for her short stories, and actually at one point she has very strong opinions. Edith Bruck. Actually, I shouldn't say that. She has strong opinions, but it's her work, and she gets to decide these things. So at one point I thought it would be interesting to combine. Actually, to be honest, I was worried about the state of publishing and worried about the difficulty of publishing anything in translation. And so I thought, well, maybe it could be a combined book of selected stories. And she rejected that. No. It has to be, this is how it should be. And of course she was right. As soon as she said no, I thought, oh my God, what was I thinking? But I've translated most of the other short story collection. It came out in 1974, and in English it would be called Two Empty Rooms. And over the summer I published an excerpt of it on the website of Jewish Currents magazine. And I don't know if you're familiar with Jewish Currents magazine, but it is absolutely an incredible publication. And actually, just this past weekend, it was mentioned in the New York Times. The New York Times had sort of a special spread of, if you are looking to support an organization at this time of the year, and one of the writers suggested Jewish Currents. And it's been a fascinating, they are covering the conflict in the Middle East in a way it's extremely heartfelt and earnest, and anyway, so they published an excerpt of it, and I hope that eventually I'll be able to publish the whole collection. This is the third book that Paul Dry Books has published of Edith Bruck's. So Mr. Paul Dry has been an incredible champion of Edith Bruck's work. But yes, this other collection is fascinating, in part because when we think about Holocaust narrative, it is very common to think that it's going to deal directly with experiences in the concentration camps. And obviously we have some incredible work that does that. In the case of Edith Bruck, two of the stories in my collection deal with it just head on. One is the story of the young German boy who rescues this Jewish girl who has either jumped from a Nazi transport train or has been pushed. And so she's dealing with it directly. In the title story, which is believed to have inspired Benigni's film Life is Beautiful, we're dealing with a sister in Edith Bruck's version, which is the original version, an older sister who is trying to shield her younger brother from the truth that they're being deported. And so there she's dealing with these issues directly. But one of the things that distinguishes her work is she's very frequently speaking about survival and what it means to be a survivor, which means post-war, the experience of what happens afterwards. And so one of the most interesting aspects is this fictionalized version of a return to her little Hungarian village, and how the the townspeople react to this return. And I was very pleased that Jewish Currents also felt that it was so striking. I don't know if you probably actually had a question, but I just wanted to give you some background. The excerpt, yes, yeah, and I'm happy to send you a link to it if you'd like. Yeah, I can do that. But yes, it's a fascinating situation where the narrator, and of course it's a fictionalized version of the author. She's a young woman who's living in Italy and returns with her husband. And Edith Bruck was married to an important Italian poet. His name was Nello Risi. In the short story, the husband's name is Marco, and she's so excited to find her village and to find the home. She's desperate to see the home where she grew up. But as word begins to spread, villagers just essentially crowd around her. And I actually have been thinking in the last couple months that it would make for an incredible work of theater. Because she worked a lot for Italian television, dialogue is very often an important part of her stories. And I think because it's just there's simply a mad scene where one person is saying, "You must come to my house. We are so happy to see you, and we're so sorry about what happened. I insist you must eat at our house." And then another neighbor comes, "No, our house. We are the happiest to see you, and we're the sorriest for what happened. Please, you must dine at our house." And it's really an insane work, but wonderful. Exactly, and there's a moment in it where, and this is in the excerpt on Jewish Currents, where a woman says, "Just let me touch you, and I'll be absolved of my sins." And the narrator has such conflicted feelings. These people did nothing for her and her family, and she says they literally watched on that morning when we were deported and did nothing. But the woman insists and says, "We've all sinned." And she's moved. She finds herself moved by this woman's clear regret. So yeah, actually, what you've said is spot on. It's really an interesting work. Trying to think if there's anything else I can tell you about Edith. Yes. I think so. In a wider sense, not specific to her, women authors, Italian women authors, are translated much less often than male authors, and so I do not translate full time, which gives me a little bit of a luxury in that if you translate full time, and I have friends that do, you translate what you're asked to translate. So in this situation, my interest is overlooked Italian women writers. And so another project that I've worked on, and I was lucky enough to get a Penn grant for it, is an author who she won the equivalent of the Pulitzer in Italy, and her book has not been translated. And so when I started to look at women authors who hadn't been translated, Edith Bruck's work jumped out because, as I said, millions of Americans have seen Life is Beautiful. And, the key plot twist from her story is that the reality is being hidden, that a young boy's innocence is protected. And that comes directly from the story. And so you have a situation like this more often than you'd think. Now, things have changed dramatically in the last 10 years because people have discovered the work of Elena Ferrante. And so, luckily, there's I would say almost a boom in interest in Italian women writers, which makes me very happy because that is my passion. And, in fact, another one of Edith Bruck's books was published by Paul Dry Books in 2021. So I think the other thing too, if I can say, is that I submitted. I often tell this story. I submitted the story Sylvia that I mentioned about the young German boy who rescues the Jewish stowaway. I submitted it to the New Yorker because my thought was, in Italy, she's New Yorker level famous, Edith Bruck, and so I felt I needed to do that. And I'm pleased to say they considered it very seriously. But the fiction editor at the time said to me that the ending of the story just wasn't satisfying to them for some reason. And of course, there's nothing I can do about that because I'm the translator. But I think that we find ourselves in an unusual situation in that luckily a great deal of Holocaust narrative and poetry has been published and translated. In some cases it was written in English, but a lot of it has been translated. And so that is wonderful. And in fact, you were talking about Paul Celan before, and of course his work has been translated. But what has happened is that sometimes when I have submitted Edith Bruck's work, in one case in particular, an editor said, and she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry to say this, but we've published a lot of Holocaust work." And what I have found when I started to translate her work seriously, and I got the NEA grant, I also got a fellowship at the New York Public Library, and I was wanting to translate particular phrases with extra care. And so I thought, well, let me look at the works of other Holocaust survivors, and then in particular, let me look at women survivors. And I don't know how this is possible other than in the same way each snowflake is different, each person is different, each person's story of survival is different. And so, okay, I guess it's true, yes, a lot has been published, but no exaggeration, every story is a little different. Every book that I've read, every poem by a survivor, it's that person's individual story. So to answer your question, I think, there's a confluence of factors. One is women are translated less frequently. Certainly from Italian, that is the case. Changing, but still a vast log of women that still need to be translated. And then unfortunately there is some sense of, we've published a lot of works by Holocaust survivors. But unfortunately, Edith's story I find is, it's unique. She's Hungarian-born, and she was deported when she was about 13, and she's written these sets of stories and this kind of work, and so it deserves an audience in the United States, I think, and anywhere they speak English. But does that help? Okay. All right. Well, yes, no, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.